working environment for everyone else who had to be there every night.
You don't know till you get to the building.
Bret Hart was one of wrestling's greatest stars, but after Montreal, he betrayed me, became the story he told again and again. He was trained to protect his opponents. He built his whole career on trust, discipline, and real athletic skill. Yet when you look at the 7 people he named as betrayers, you find 7 very different stories. Some were real double crosses, some were backstage politics. Some were just harsh opinions about how wrestling should be done. One was a serious injury caused by careless work. One was not even real. It was a scripted TV storyline. So was Bret truly surrounded by enemies? Or did he sometimes treat every hard moment in his career as a personal betrayal? This story still has fans talking, so use the hype feature and give this video some hype while we sort out what really happened. Before we get into each name, we need to understand the code Bret lived by, because that code shaped every grudge he ever carried. And it will help explain why some of these names feel so different from the others once we look closely. Bret Hart was trained by his father, Stu Hart, in the legendary dungeon in Calgary, Alberta. That training was not gentle. It demanded discipline, real conditioning, and total trust between opponents. Bret came up believing that wrestling was an art form, one that required legitimate athletic ability alongside a serious commitment to protecting the other man in the ring. He took pride in one simple fact. Across thousands of brutal, high-impact matches, he never legitimately injured a single opponent. That record meant everything to him, and he saw it as proof that wrestling could be both dangerous and honest at the same time. Because of this, Bret used a harsh word for wrestlers he felt did not meet his standard. He called them frauds. In his mind, a fraud was someone who leaned on fame, backstage politics, repeated tricks, or reckless physical hype instead of real skill and real safety. A performer's popularity or merchandise sales meant nothing to him if that performer could not be trusted to protect an opponent. This code made Bret a legend. It also made him deeply unforgiving of anyone who worked differently than he did. Keep that code in mind as we go through his list, because his standards were high, admirable even, but they were also very much his own, and they left little room for people who saw the business through a different lens. The clearest case on Bret's list is Shawn Michaels. By 1997, the hatred between them was no longer just a storyline. There were public, unscripted insults on television. There was a real backstage fight in Hartford, Connecticut, after Michaels made comments about Bret's personal life. The tension had been building for years, but by this point, it had turned into genuine hostility between 2 of the company's biggest stars. Trying to fix things, Bret met Michaels in San Jose that October. Bret offered something big. He said he would lose the WWF Championship cleanly to Michaels if the company asked him to. It was a peace offering built on old-school professional trust, the same kind of trust Bret believed the entire business was supposed to run on. Michaels reportedly said he appreciated the gesture, but he would not promise to return the favor and lose to Bret at any point in the future. To Bret, that refusal broke wrestling's unwritten code of reciprocity. So when Survivor Series came around in Canada, Bret used his contractual creative control and refused to drop the title to Michaels on Canadian soil. The agreed plan going into the match was a complicated disqualification finish, one designed to protect both men, with the belt changing hands later at a bigger event in December. Instead, Michaels locked Bret in Bret's own signature move, the sharpshooter. Referee Earl Hebner, who had reportedly sworn on his children's lives that he would never take part in a double cross, called for the bell before Bret ever submitted. Michaels was declared champion on the spot. Bret's face in that moment showed real shock and real anger. This was the genuine article. A promise was made, then broken, in front of a live Canadian crowd that had come to see their hometown hero go out on his own terms. But it is worth noting that Bret was not simply a powerless bystander in all of this. His own refusal to lose, backed by contract language he was fully entitled to use, helped push the company toward a solution he never saw coming and could not fully control. Then there is Vince McMahon, the man Bret once viewed almost as a father figure. For nearly 14 years, Bret trusted him completely. He took smaller paydays, he wrestled through serious pain because Vince promised long-term security in return. In 1996, Vince signed Bret to a huge, unprecedented long-term deal, paying him $1.5 million a year during the active wrestling phase, with a lucrative advisory role planned for years afterward. But WCW was winning the ratings war on Monday nights, and Vince soon claimed the WWF could not afford that contract anymore. he pushed Bret toward WCW, who offered $2.8 million a year over a 3-year deal. Strange as it sounds, even while encouraging Bret to leave, Vince became fixated on the fear that WCW might put the WWF title on Monday Nitro for the world to see. Bret promised that would never happen. He even proposed a workable plan to drop the belt safely at a later date, keeping the title away from WCW's cameras the entire time. Instead of trusting the man who had given him 14 years of loyalty and total creative control, Vince approved the secret Montreal finish behind Bret's back. After the match, an enraged Bret confronted Vince in the back and knocked him out cold with one punch. For Bret, this was the deepest betrayal of the entire list, because it came from someone he had trusted like family for almost his entire career. Still, it is fair to ask whether Bret's own pride, his refusal to compromise, and his personal war with Michaels made an already fragile situation even harder for anyone involved to fix peacefully. Vince had built his entire promotion around trusted relationships, and Bret had been one of the most loyal names on the roster for well over a decade. Watching that same man choose a secret plan instead of an honest conversation left a wound that never fully closed, no matter how much time passed afterward. Bret later said the trust between them was never truly repaired, even during the years they eventually worked alongside each other again, and even after their public reconciliation many years later, long before Montreal, there was Hulk Hogan. Back at WrestleMania 9 in 1993, Bret lost the WWF title to Yokozuna through outside interference. Hogan then walked out immediately afterward, challenged Yokozuna, and beat him for the belt in only 22 seconds. Bret believed this sudden title change was meant to build toward a passing of the torch match at SummerSlam that same year, where Hogan would finally put him over cleanly. According to Bret, Hogan instead used his considerable backstage power to kill that match completely, reportedly believing a smaller technical wrestler should not be the face of the company. Hogan later dropped the title back to Yokozuna, again through outside interference, then left for WCW entirely without ever helping build Bret into the next top star. Bret saw this as Hogan protecting his own spot at any cost, later writing that Hogan would rather watch a company struggle than use his own drawing power to elevate someone else. This was backstage politics and a broken creative promise, not a secret ambush like Montreal. Bret often placed these very different moments under the same heading of betrayal, even though one was a handshake deal quietly falling apart behind the scenes, and the other was a sudden coordinated ambush in front of a live audience. Hogan never publicly agreed with Bret's version of events, and he had every right to protect his own career. From Bret's point of view, though, the WWF's new direction was quietly stalled by one man's refusal to step aside, and that frustration stayed with him for years, long after both men had moved on to different chapters of their careers. Triple H enters the story during the planning of Survivor Series 1997. He urged Vince to stop negotiating with Bret entirely and simply force the finish through if Bret would not cooperate on his own terms. Bret came to see Triple H as a rising political operator, someone who built power through relationships with management rather than pure in-ring merit or seniority. Bret also believed Triple H's influence extended well beyond their own personal conflict. He claimed Triple H worked to undermine Ken Shamrock's career, partly because Shamrock had a close connection to Bret at the time. Shamrock had real athletic credentials and genuine commercial promise, which makes the accusation worth taking seriously. Whether or not every detail of that theory holds up perfectly, it shows how Bret sometimes read ordinary political competition as a personal campaign directed against him and the people close to him. What in the years that followed, Triple H rose to become one of the most powerful figures in the entire company, eventually marrying into the McMahon family and helping shape creative direction for decades. Bret has pointed to that long rise as proof of exactly the kind of backstage skill he distrusted most, the ability to win influence through relationships rather than through performance alone. Ric Flair is a different kind of conflict entirely. This was not sabotage, and it was not a secret plot of any kind. It was a clash of egos and philosophies between two proud multi-time champions. Bret viewed Flair's flashy, theatrical style as repetitive, physically unsafe, and hollow underneath the showmanship, built on the same familiar moves and catchphrases match after match, regardless of the opponent. Bret called him a fraud, too, arguing that real technical wrestling and genuine opponent protection mattered far more than flash and charisma. Flair fired back just as hard, questioning Bret's real drawing power and mocking what he saw as Bret's overly serious self-image. Neither man was simply wrong to hold his own opinion about the craft. But this dispute shows something important about how Bret saw the world. He often treated his own preferred style as the only honest way to wrestle, and anyone who worked differently risked being labeled a fraud rather than simply being seen as different. Both men were proud champions from very different schools of wrestling, one built on flash and crowd reaction, the other built on precision and realism. Their disagreement never turned into a real feud or a physical conflict of any kind. It stayed a war of words, repeated in interviews and later in both men's memoirs. Each one convinced his own approach represented the true heart of the business. Bill Goldberg's case is not about politics at all. It is about a serious and preventable failure of physical safety. At Starrcade 1999, Goldberg delivered a stiff, careless superkick that gave Bret a severe concussion almost instantly. Bret believed Goldberg had been pushed to main event status far too quickly because of his look and his intensity, rather than because of any real technical training in the ring. WCW's handling of the injury made an already bad situation much worse. Instead of pulling Bret from action and diagnosing the severity of the damage, the company let him keep wrestling a demanding schedule for 2 more weeks. That stretch included a brutal hardcore match against Terry Funk, full of repeated chair shots directly to the head, plus a hard, unforgiving landing on concrete after being flipped out of a laundry basket during the match. According to the research, this ongoing compounding damage led directly to the permanent post-concussion syndrome that ended Bret's career for good. And it has also been connected to the life-threatening stroke he suffered years later in 2002. Bret has remained harshly critical of Goldberg ever since that night, but calling this a betrayal may not be the most precise word for what actually happened. It was a reckless, unsafe mistake, made far worse afterward by the people responsible for protecting Bret's health. Real anger is understandable here, even if a deliberate, intentional backstab is not exactly the right way to describe it. Goldberg himself later expressed regret over the incident, acknowledging that the kick landed far stiffer than intended. For Bret, though, the damage was already permanent by the time any apology arrived. A career built carefully over 2 decades, on a foundation of never legitimately hurting an opponent, ended because of one careless moment and 2 more weeks of being allowed to work through it. The final name on the list, Jim Neidhart, is the strangest of all because his betrayal never actually happened in real life. Bret and Neidhart built the Hart Foundation together, winning multiple tag team championships and building genuine trust over years spent traveling the country side by side. At King of the Ring in 1994, Neidhart turned on Bret during a televised match, siding instead with Bret's younger brother, Owen Hart. That moment helped Owen win the tournament outright and kicked off a long, emotional family storyline that played out over TV for years afterward. It was scripted from the very beginning, planned carefully by the writers and the performers involved. It worked so well precisely because the real Hart family bond felt completely genuine to the audience watching at home. Those same family storylines became far more painful years later after Owen's tragic accidental death, though that difficult chapter is really a separate story of its own. Still, placing this single scripted moment alongside something like Montreal shows just how loosely Bret sometimes used the word betrayal, mixing real backstage backstabbing with pure planned TV drama meant only to entertain. Neidhart and Bret remained close after the storyline ended. Proof that everyone involved understood the difference between the story and the real relationship underneath it. That difference is exactly what makes this case so useful for understanding Bret's list as a whole. Looking at all 7 names together, the categories could not be more different from one another. A real corporate double-cross backstage political sabotage, a dangerous, career-ending physical injury, a personal clash over craft and ego, a scripted storyline turned written for television. Years later, that same real-world conflict became entertainment all over again when Bret finally defeated Vince at WrestleMania 26 in a fittingly dramatic match. The business found a clever way to sell Bret's genuine pain right back to the very audience that had lived through the original controversy with him. And that brings us back to the real question sitting at the heart of this entire list. Bret was genuinely wronged by more than one person here, and nobody should pretend otherwise. But his public retelling of these years often flattens 5 completely different kinds of conflict into one single, simple tale of loyalty and betrayal. Bret Hart's 7 cases do not all prove the same thing, and that is really the whole point of looking closely at each one. Montreal was a true, deliberate double-cross, carried out by people he trusted. Hogan and Triple H represent backstage politics and broken promises about the future. Flair represents a clash of styles, pride, and two very different ideas about the craft. Goldberg represents a dangerous, preventable failure of basic ring safety. Neidhart represents nothing more than clever, scripted family drama, meant to pull at the audience's emotions. Bret's own greatness may be exactly why his bitterness carries so much lasting weight with fans. He truly believed wrestling had a real moral code, and he held everyone around him to that same standard, including himself. Whatever you personally think of how he judged each name on this list, his technical skill and his genuine care for the people across the ring from him remain the true foundation of his legacy today. Bret Hart gave wrestling some of its finest, safest, and most honestly told matches. And that standard is still worth real respect all these years later.